Hey, I'm Kev, Mr. Cole. Welcome to Power Oversteer, the motorsport show that doesn't get slowed down by anything. Oh, come on, Hawksworth, get in the slow lane, mate. No, the slow lane is on the other side. Bloody Brits in America. Now know what you done. It's a jam-packed Power Oversteer as the whole IndyCar and Mazda Road to Indy gang visit the beautiful Barber Motorsports Park for the Honda Indy Grand Prix of Alabama. Out of the 7 races, there are many crazy, sublime and scary moments, particularly in Indy Lights, Pro Mazda and USF 2000. But we begin as we always do with IndyCar and a weekend that built to a crashing crescendo. The weekend recap seems to be following the same pattern this season so far. There's a crash on an otherwise quiet first day as teams and drivers figure out setups. Then it ramps up in the final practice for qualifying as the drivers start to push it, with multiple red flags likely. Qualifying sees us be amazed by Penske with someone noticeably ending up out of position and Honda getting an at least you tried cake. However, their drivers do show well in final practice before the race actually sees a shuffle in the order, a bit with Chevrolet ruling the day. Alabama was no different, mostly. Friday saw plenty of drivers testing the grip on and off track. In turn 5, MacLeod and Ryan Hunter-Reay had difficult times, while Scott Dixon, Sebastian Bourdais and Will Power had moments in turns 7 and 8. When Pablo Montoya was forced to sit out the last 2 minutes of first practice due to unsportsmanlike conduct after he ran wide in turns 2 and 3, almost into a cruising Bourdais. The unusual thing on the opening day was that, like last year, Honda looked more at home than they have done so far this season. Bourdais may have topped the pile in first practice, but he was followed by 5 Honda drivers, and 7 of them were in the top 10. Second practice saw Foyt 1-2 with Takuma Sato ahead of Jack Hawksworth. Hinch followed and Graham Rahal finished 5th to make it 4 Hondas in the top 5 with Power the odd man out. Things got back to normal in third practice on Saturday as Power and Dixon occupied the top spots, but Hinch and Munoz continued their good practice form heading into qualifying. However, turn 5 proved to be tricky as shown by the red flags put out in this session due to errors there. Max Chilton spun and stalled within 5 minutes into the session to bring out the first red flag. Sato mowed the lawn after locking up into the hairpin about 15 minutes later before he flattened the gravel out as he spun into it with about 5 minutes left of the session to bring out the other red flag. Needless to say, his good showing on Friday was quickly forgotten. Up next, qualifying was frantic with drivers having to nail their first laps on the red tyres, or risk getting knocked down in an ultra tight first segment. Group 1 saw Chip Ganassi's Charlie Kimball and Chilton scrape through ahead of Aleshkin, Munoz and Connor Daly by 9 thousandths, 27 thousandths and 500ths of a second. In Group 2, Tony Kanaan, Hinch and Luca Filippi beat the AJ Foyt pair of Hawksworth and Sato by 100th and 1.5 hundredths of a second. Told you it was close. Second segment saw Bourdais set a new lap record around Barber of a minute 6.6, but in the fast 6 it was about Penske and Pagenaud v Power. Power put down the mark of a minute 6.9, however the Frenchman replied with a minute 6.7 to take only the 3rd pole of his IndyCar career. Last year's winner Joseph Newgarden started on the second row along with reigning champion Scott Dixon, who had big oversteer in the last corner on his lap with Bourdais and Rahal behind. Helio Castroneves only qualified 7th after 2 consecutive poles as he made a mistake pitting with just under a minute left instead of going for another lap. Hinch ended up 8th ahead of Kanaan, who struggled to get a good run with an unpredictable car that was loose 1 minute and tight the next. Kimball started in a good 10th with top rookie Chilton and Filippi filling in the 6th row. However, a couple of big names had a Saturday to forget. Hunter-Reay ran wide in segment 1 in turn 8 on a lap that would have got him through in Group 2, but the 2-time Barber winner qualified in 18th instead, just ahead of teammate Andretti. Worse came from Montoya, who was unhappy with the car as the Reds didn't come in as well as expected, meaning he qualified last of the 21 drivers, but that just meant it was more fun for us and the Colombian in the race. At the start, he tore it up, climbing up to 12th by the end of the first green flag lap. He wasn't the only one. Equally as impressive was Marco Andretti getting into the top 10 from 19th, while his teammate Munoz showed off his particular skill, which led to the first aborted start of the race. Lined up for the green flag, virtually at the line, the Clubman jumped the gun and got into the back of Oversteer, who went round and forced Hawksworth to take to the grass in avoidance of the spinning Russian. The next start got waved off, so it was third time lucky. At the back, Sato got wide into the dirt in turns 2 and 3 before Bourdais, the only guy starting on the harder compound tyre compared to the rest of the top 6, got caught out in Charlotte's Web at turn 5. The KVSH racing driver braked too late on the inside line and gently tapped Dixon around, ending the Kiwis' chances of getting another podium around Barber. A move that did work out was Newgarden snatching second from Powell in the penultimate corner on the first lap, catching out the Penske racer with a tough inside dive. However, it was the outside move in turn 5 that proved popular throughout the race. Charlie Kimball seemed to continue his surge up the order with a move on Hinchcliffe on lap 9. He kept the inside line through into turn 7 to take 6th, until he was told to give the position back by the stewards, which he duly did on lap 13 when the first round of stops started. Luca Fairby pitted from a great 9th for Dale Coyne as the red tyres started to go off. His teammate Daly tried the turn 5 move on Chilton, but locked up and went through the grass. It wouldn't be the first time we would see the rookie though. Helio Castroneves had more success on Kimball in that 20 for 9th. The second stint saw Hunter Ray stand out, like in Long Beach, but this time for making moves. He dived down the inside of Andretti in turn 5 on that 24, then got past another teammate in Alexander Rossi for 10th on that 36, as the rookie's red tyres started to go off. We saw Newgarden struggling with tyres at the same time as the harder tyre runners started to come to the fore, especially Graham Rahal. He got past his fellow American in turn 7 on that 39 for 3rd, as the second round of stops started to happen with Rossi the first coming in. During the stops we saw Montoya move up to 6th, while Tony Khan fell down the order with Hinchcliffe and Castroneves getting past him in turn 5 as he slowly got up to speed on his red tyres. The penultimate stint of the race was quiet from a passing perspective as Conor Daly was Pied Piper in the leaders round while running mostly top 5 lap times until the final round of stops, but we did get insight into the strategy side during this segment. Leader Pagenaud questioned the decision to stick with blacks, but his engineer Carl Moy explained that the red tyres were only better for 4 laps, which was proven on the timing screens. Only 9 drivers went with the softer option at this time to save them for the last part of the race, much like Rahal. His engineer confirmed in an interview that they were going for a repeat of last year with a charge on new red tyres in the final stint. The final round of stops started on lap 64 with Hinchcliffe switching to new red tyres after he struggled on his previous reds, particularly on the right front, which meant Montoya and Castroneves Penske stomped him in consecutive laps before he pitted. The Canadian would fall further behind Montoya for 5th in the stops. He wasn't alone as Will Power fell behind Rahal for 2nd, Dixon snuck into the top 10 over Hunter Ray, and Philippe dropped a couple positions to Aleshkin and Bourdais while getting lapped. Daly got lapped by Pagenaud during the stops, but Rahal had to wait until before turn 5 on that 74 to get past the rookie. 4.3 seconds was the gap between first and second at this time, but the leading Penske driver encountered more traffic, with Aleshkin and Bourdais battling for 17th. His former Peugeot MP1 teammate pulled over on lap 80, then got quickly lapped by Rahal to set up a battle for the lead in the final 10 laps of the race. With 8 pushed passes compared to Pagenaud's 3 at the beginning of the stint, Rahal had saved his up, while Pagenaud had to use one to lap Philippe, and that advantage in pushes came into play on lap 82. The charge came towards turn 7 with the American down the inside, but the Frenchman was going to give it up easy, and as they got to the corner, there was contact. The front left wing of the Rahal got into the right rear of the Penske, sending it through the gravel and Rahal into the lead. Aleshkin got quickly out by both of them before Rahal found a roadblock in Hawksworth, which allowed Pagenaud to catch up and get close in turn 2, then get a run out of turn 5 on lap 85. The leading Honda followed his comrade down the next straight while Pagenaud tried to get alongside. However, the AJ Foyt driver slowed to let the leaders through, which forced Rahal to evade and quickly switch lanes, almost forcing the Penske into the grass. Unfortunately, Rahal completed the job on his front ring. He got damaged on the right side around lap 40, on the left side in the contact on lap 82, and was gone after clipping the rear of Hawksworth's car in avoidance. With a car resembling Gilles Villeneuve's from the 1981 Canadian Grand Prix, the lead was lost in the penultimate corner before 4 laps of running up to 5 seconds of the pace and trying to hold on to second for the Rahal Detman Lanigan driver. After leading for 84 out of the 90 laps, Pagenaud grabbed his second win in a row to continue his sublime start to the season. However, some amazing driving behind that took centre stage on the final lap as Rahal held off Newgarden to grab a well-deserved second place. Power dropped to 4th on the penultimate lap as the 2015 Alabama winner Book ended his race with another great move on the 2014 series champion. Pablo Montoya rounded out the top 5 from last on the grid, ahead of Hinchcliffe and Castro Neves, who suffered from blistered tyres that almost saw him crash in the middle of the race. Kanaan led a Chip Ganassi block to round out the top 10, ahead of Kimball and a battling Dixon. He set the fastest lap by almost a second on lap 66 with a minute 8.4533. Ryan Hunter-Reay was the best Andretti driver by a mile and the third best Honda in 11th. Marco Andretti didn't have the pace to keep up with his teammate in 12th, as highlighted by him having the slowest fastest lap of anyone, while Sato improved in the second of the race to 13th, ahead of Munoz, and the last lead lap finisher, the fourth Andretti of Alexander Rossi. Bourdais muscled his way past Oleshkin in the last corners on lap 85 and was the fastest guy in the last few laps of the race, and in if only race for the Frenchman who set the 5th fastest lap of the race. Oleshkin, Filippi, Hawksworth, Daly, who had the 2nd fastest lap of all the Honda runners, again in a race this season, and an incredibly off-the-pace Chilton, who found the car to be a joke with no front-end grip, completed the order. Heading into the month of May, Pagenaud leads the championship by 188 points. That's 52 more points than Montoya had when leading the standings at the same point last season. 48 points back of the Penske this season is reigning champion Dixon, with Montoya third on 136 points. Yes, the same total as last season. Castroneves is 4th on 118 points, 12 points ahead of his pal Kanaan. Rahal has jumped up to be the best Honda driver in the championship in 6th with 100 points, 6 ahead of Power, who's racing up the order, 9 ahead of Newgarden, who's just 1 point ahead of Sato, with Ryan Hunter-Reay rounding out the top 10 on 87 points. Chilton's the best rookie in 16th in the standings with 64 points, 5 ahead of Rossi and Daly. The Rookie of the Year battle has proven to be as tight as expected, with no doubt lots of improvement to come from the three of them as this season progresses. Not a bad race in the end, wasn't it? However, it didn't go on without some talking points developing that we will look at or mention as we hand out the green, yellow and red flags. Firstly, the green flag goes to team, driver, company, etc. who do well the whole weekend, particularly during the race. There are always a few candidates and Alabama was no exception. There's Simon Pagenaud for winning his 2nd race in a week, which extends his championship lead to 48 points and into the month of May, just a sublime start to the season from the Frenchman, but I've run out of superlatives to talk about him. Then there's Charlie Kim, who didn't mess up during the race for once and got a very quiet top 10 finish, ahead of his teammate Scott Dixon, who recovered well from that first lap punt from Sebastian Bourdais. However, the green flag goes to a couple of guys who are just chasing something during the race, and another who just backed up what he did in Long Beach. So the green flag goes to Graham Rahal for coming so close to that win, to Pablo Montoya for coming from the back and grabbing an unlikely top 5 finish, and to James Hinchcliffe for having his 2nd solid weekend in a row. Graham Rahal had another weekend in Barber that could kickstart his season, just like it did last year. In 2015, his Alabama podium got backed up by another 2nd place at the Grand Prix of Indianapolis and a top 5 finish in the Indy 500 as he was the top Honda runner, just ahead of Marco Andretti. Of course, he went on to launch in a title challenge with wins at Fontana and Mid-Ohio later in the season, although it fell apart in the last 2 races. I'm not saying he could challenge for the series crown once again, but his start to the season has been very similar. In St. Pete, he had pace, but a crash ruined his race. This time, he wasn't at fault, unlike last year, as Munoz pole-drived him into the tyres. Felix saw a brilliant run to a top 5 that was followed by another indifferent race on a street circuit. There was pace shown during the Sunday at Long Beach, but a poor showing on the Saturday compromised his race before it begun, as Rahal used an alternate strategy to try and make up places. It didn't work out as he was forced into a long final stint that ended with him running out of fuel in the last corner. In Barber, he had an all-around great weekend, showing pace in practice that was backed up by his fast 6 appearance during qualifying. The 27-year-old took advantage of the contact between Bourdais and Dixon to slot into 4th on the opening green flag lap, a position he would hold for the first half of the race until he passed Newgarden near the end of the 2nd stint. Then it was daily train time up to the final round of stops when he jumped Power, leading to his battle with Pagenaud in the final 10 laps of the race. The contact between them was unfortunate, but Rahal would have likely held on to the win if he didn't get caught out by Hawksworth. In the end, perhaps second was meant to be. It was a brilliant drive in the last 4 laps with no front wing, and it showed what was really impressive about Rahal this race, his relentlessness. It's something we've grown accustomed to from him in this Aero Kit era. His title challenge last season was built on getting the most out of the Honda package during races and sometimes stealthily racking up the top 5 and top 10 finishes. He displayed this quality in Felix, and it was maybe more impressive in Barber. His pace on the harder tyre was unbelievable, particularly in the third stint when he was the only driver consistently in the 109s until he caught up with Pagenaud and Power stuck behind Daly. He then pursued Pagenaud like he did with the likes of Dixon and Power last year. Unfortunately, it didn't end how he wanted, but it was the display that boosted the confidence of not just him and the team, but Honda before the month of May. Hopefully he doesn't bring up the monetary affairs of his relatives, for a laugh in his words, yeah right, the next time he comes across Daly on the track though. What can you say about Montoya's drive? In a race that went green the whole way through, it's incredible what he did. Yes, he was driving a Penske, so getting a top 10 might have been a reality. And a top 5 was always in the realms of possibility. But the way he got it, it was just fun, as the man himself said. After the first green flag lap of the race, he was 12th, as he and Marco Andretti were aggressive at the start and took advantage of the trouble in turn 5. He got past Rossi to end the opening stint in 11th, but superb work from his Penske crew in the first round of stops jumped him up to 7th in the order. He did report suffering a mushy shifter, though, on that 38, affecting his gear changes as he sat behind Canaan and Hinchcliffe until the next stint. He quickly dispatched Canaan as he tiptoed around on his reds at the beginning of their run, then got past Hinchcliffe as he struggled on his worn reds at the end of the third stint. The final part of the race for Montoya was about holding on to 5th as he struggled to maintain the tyres in the last few laps. Luckily, Hinchcliffe had to do some saving of his own at the same time. After the race, the reigning Indy 500 winner talked about the pure joy of that race and how he keeps racing for days like that. May he have more days where he has to battle hard through the field, because re-watch for drives like that. For James Hinchcliffe, it's another solid start to the season for Smith-Peterson Motorsports. Last year he won in Noda and was in 7th in the standings before his season got prematurely ended by that frightening Indy 500 practice crash. He might be just outside the top 10 in the championship, but he's had a similar start this time around. The top 10 qualifying in St. Pete was squandered at the first corner when Newgarden got into him, causing a puncture. The Felix weekend went down the pan after a heavy crash in first practice. However, Long Beach saw a weekend spent in the top 10, and Alabama was the same. The only issue Hinch had was missing the setup slightly, which meant the tyres went off 4 or 5 laps from the end of stints. At the end, he had the pace for Montoya but had to save fuel. Without the tyres going off, a top 5 would have been a certainty, and maybe more with what happened at the end of the race. Long Beach and Barber has provided a Canadian with some vital momentum heading into the month of May, and who wants to bet against the mayor of Hinchtown not taking advantage of that and banish what happened last year into a distant memory. On to the yellow flag, which normally means a team, driver, company, etc. had a good or bad weekend, but we got to be whoa, calm down, it's only one weekend. But in Alabama it goes to the stewards because they actually made some good decisions, but there were a couple that made you wonder what they were actually watching. First, let's give the stewards their due. The non-call in the Pagenaud Rahal incident showed a race controller understood racing, and that incidents will happen if drivers race that hard. Pagenaud looked to leave Rahal as little room as possible into turn 7 on the 85, while the American didn't have much of the car alongside, but had the run on his Penske rival with the aid of push to pass, and wasn't likely to pull out of a move for the lead with so little time left in the race. The resulting contact was almost expected, with Rahal continuing on with another wound to his front wing, and Pagenaud taking a trip through the gravel before rejoining a few seconds back in second. With the way I apportion blame in this incident, the outcome on track seemed to resolve it proportionally. Thus, didn't need race control to get involved, which they thankfully didn't, so that's one thumbs up. In fact, the whole race breezed by, like Long Beach, with very little incidents for them to look at. Bourdais rightly got a drive-through penalty for his contact with Dixon on the first green flag lap, and the speed in which these decisions were made are greatly appreciated after the ridiculous slowness of the previous few years. However, there were a couple of questionable decisions. On lap 9, Charlie Kimball went around the outside of James Hinchcliffe in turn 5, and they ran side by side until turn 7, when the Smith-Peterson Motorsports driver gave up the fight and 6th place. Unfortunately, the stewards got involved and told Kimball to give the place back, which he did a few laps later. The stewards saw a squeeze towards turn 7 that was barely there. Kimball did move over, but still left Hinch a car's width space on the outside. The Canadian was not in a position to challenge into the normally 1-9 corners coming up. He was stuck on the outside and didn't have the advantage going into turn 7, so the position was lost in turn 5 and on the run to turn 7, not in that braking zone. Whatever way you look at the incident, it's mystifying that the stewards intervened. On the opposite end of the scale, it's strange that a caution wasn't brought out for Rahil's front wing, lying in the middle of the track on the run between turns 5 and 7 after his clash with Hawksworth. I know it's tempting to keep a race green, especially with the wing of the natural racing line, but it was a big piece, and after recent years, I thought IndyCar would know better. It was disappointing to see that. After Hinchcliffe got hit on the head by Davey at the Grand Prix of Indianapolis in 2014, a fan got hit by an end winglet at St. Pete last year, and the fatal accident of Justin Wilson at Pocono 8 months ago, a big piece of debut on the track is seemingly nothing. We saw at Phoenix this year the race being kept green despite debut from Ryan Hunter-Reay's car being on the track following his contact with the wall with 10 laps to go. His right rear winglet was at the bottom of the track, well off the racing line, so guess that was more of a 50-50 call despite the track being incredibly high speed. Hopefully IndyCar are more cautious in the future. Kudos to the drivers for keeping it green the last 2 races. I know technically the called off start at Barber on lap 2 was a caution, but it shouldn't have been at Barber, no, officially. All you needed was a lap or 2 to let the marshals clean up the mess and get the wing off the track. Then we would have had a 1 or 2 lap shootout at the end. That sounds win-win, except maybe for Rahal. Finally, the red flag means you done fucked up, son, and Sebastian Bourdais, you messed up everything. What was your problem? I believed in you. You had 2 fights in top 10 finishes in a row after whatever St. Pete was. Then you got my hopes up for Barber by being fastest in first practice, and into my picks you went. Top 10s in the 2 practices before qualifying kept my hopes up, and then it went overboard. I knew that record, and 5th on the grid had me thinking that Sunday was Bourdais, with a top 5 a certainty, a podium likely, even a win was in the balance. A top 5 in final practice backed up my thinking. But then that 3 happened. I thought the start was bad as you struggled to stay in the top 5, but into turn 5, you lost it. What's the point of brake pedal if you can't use it? I'm on the slower tyre, so I'm going to brake at the same point as all these soft tyre versions around me. What? It wasn't only Dixon you portrayed on that corner, it was me. Your locked up tyres created a smoke screen that I couldn't see through for the rest of the race. It only cleared up when I saw you battle and overtake Filippi and Alishkin. You scored them. It was an insult. It was a glimpse into what could have been. You were the fastest driver at the end of the race and set one of the fastest laps during the race. Why did you have to be fast at the wrong time on that first green flag lap? We could have had everything. We could have been a contender for the win, the glory, the confetti, but no, we get nothing. So you're benched for like the next 5 races until Road America or Toronto. Don't even tempt me with being good in the month of May, Detroit or Texas. I'm not one of those pickers who goes back to their favourites like some weak-minded infatuation. You can't dazzle or maze to win me over. No, you sit on the pint and think about what you've done. Good day, sir. So that's IndyCar covered. Now it's the Mazda Road to Indy's turn. Beginning with a weekend that closed up a championship and showed that Indy Lights is one of the most competitive series in the world. It's amazing how close everyone is in this championship. 15 drivers from 6 different teams were separated by a second in qualifying for the first race as Ed Jones grabbed his first pole position of the year. Zachary Clayman de Mello brilliantly joined him on the front row before he was dropped to the back of the field because his car failed post-qualifying tech. Therefore, Dean Stoneman got his best start in Indy Lights to date with second, ahead of R.C. Anderson, Shelby Blackstock and Santi Urota. Felix Rosenquist started 6th after his best qualifying lap was disallowed due to blocking. Scott Anderson didn't qualify due to an engine problem, so started 16th and last. On the formation lap, Stoneman spun round and was forced to start from the back. When the race did get underway, we saw Rosenquist make a spectacular move round the outside of 3 cars to grab third ahead of Urata and another quick starter in Team Pelfrey, Scott Hargrove, up from 8th to 5th. Ed Jones held the lead from RC Anderson until the first caution came out on lap 3. Rosenqvist took turn 1 like normal, but Urata dived down his inside, punting the Swede into the gravel and giving him a flat left rear tyre. The Uruguayan got sent to the back of the field for the next restart and a drive-through penalty for avoidable contact. Both would keep going after pitting for repairs. The race went green on lap 6 and saw Anderson and Hargrove battle side by side until the exit of turn 5 when Hargrove forced Anderson onto the dirt, dropping the Smith-Peterson driver down to 7th, while the Pelfrey driver got a flat right rear tyre, meaning he had to pit at the end of that, dropping him down to 14th. The major benefactor from all of this contact was Felix Serrales, who leapfrogged to 2nd from 11th on the grid with Zach Veach and Blackstock in tow. Championship leader Karl Kaiser dropped back to 4 seconds off the lead by around lap 15, but started to reel in the leaders with Cayman DeMello, who was an incredible 6th from the back. With the order stabilised, Serrales started putting pressure on teammate Jones for the lead, especially when the Brit was slowed by Rosenqvist, who picked up a flat left front tyre this time and needed to pit again. The Puerto Rican in second place drove angry after being unhappy with his qualifying performance and promised himself he would be on the podium. It showed on lap 31 when he ran wide in the last corner. Then on the last lap, he lost the rear in turns 10 and 11, so went wide, kicking up more dirt and actually flying slightly as the floor dug in. In the end, Jones grabbed his first win since Long Beach a year ago to lead a Carlin 1-2 ahead of Serrales. Veach had major pressure from Blackstock but held on to get a good podium. Kaiser retired on lap 26 when he stopped in Charlotte's Web, meaning Junker's teammate DeMello got a brilliant first top 5 in Indy Lights, ahead of Anderson, with Pelfrey's Juan Pedroito in 7th, meaning all 6 teams had a finisher in the top 7. Told you this series was competitive. Andre Nagel, Dalton Killett and Scott Anderson completed the top 10, with Urata in 11th after all his troubles and setting the fastest lap on lap 9 of the 35 of that race with 1:15.3. It was a sign of what could have been in race 1, but what was going to happen in race 2. Jones started from pole once again ahead of Stoneman, Urata, Anderson and Blackstock. The Carlin driver held on at the front while teammate Serrales wasn't going to have a repeat of race 1 as he spun on the first lap, sending him to the back of the field. Veach struggled with a tail-happy car as he went wide in turn 1, and though he gained a position by the end of the lap to 9th. Another driver suffering in the second race was Pedroito, who got a drive-through penalty for avoidable contact on lap 3 and dropped to last when he took it the next lap. Meanwhile, on the move in the right direction was Urata as he got past Stoneman for second on lap 2, then dived down the inside of Jones with a late move in turn 5 on lap 4 to take the lead. The reigning Pro Mazda champion Judy pulled away from the field as he set the fastest lap on lap 21 with a 1:15.925 and became the 5th different winner in 5 races, winning by 4 seconds from Jones. The Kahneman drove a controlled race, holding off Stoneman and Anderson as he got his 3rd podium on the trot. Stoneman made up for a race 1 beset with technical problems to grab his maiden Indy Lights podium with a fine 3rd. Anderson finished in an Andretti sandwich as Blackstock grabbed another top 5 finish. Kaiser got 6th ahead of his teammate DeMello, who once again moved up from the back. He got into the top 10 from 15th within the first 4 laps before dispatching Veach, Killett and Rosenqvist in the next 5 to end up 7th. He couldn't find a way past his teammate, but what a weekend from the young Canadian. He was the only other driver to post the fastest lap in the 1:15s with a 15.943. Rosenqvist, the remaining Andretti driver Killett and Veach rounded out the top 10 as Pelfrey had a race to forget with Hargrove in 12th and Pedroito rooted to last for most of the 30-lap race. Leaving Barber, Jones now leads the championship with 108 points, 6 ahead of Kaiser and 14 ahead of Serrales. Urata jumped up to 4th after his win with 89 points, 7 ahead of teammate Anderson. Veach is 6th with 75 points, 1 ahead of Bilardi teammate Rosenqvist, 3 ahead of Stoneman and 5 ahead of Negrau. Blackstock rounds out the top 10 with 60 points after his first good weekend of the season. Carlin leads the team's championship with 127 points, 20 ahead of Smith-Peterson Motorsports. Junkers are 3rd with 84 points, 9 ahead of Bilardi and 15 ahead of Andretti. Pelfrey round out the standings on 38 points. Meanwhile, Pro Mazda had a familiar feel with those cars in yellow, once again at the front. Only 10 cars turned up for Barber with no national class entries, so it's all about the main class, and Pelfrey are once again in a different class. The most entertaining session of the weekend was qualifying for the first race as a wet track dried up during the session. Most drivers went out on wet tyres apart from the Pelfrey team, who waited until about 10 minutes left to go out on slicks, and it looked like an inspired move as they held the top 3 spots with 5 minutes left. However, the track was drying at a rapid rate with all the drivers on slicks, as lap times fell from 1:26s at this period down to 1:22s at the end of the session. Coming out on top was Alan Tillis with a 1:22.4664, but Junks' Garrett Grist broke up the Pelfrey party with a 1:22.4800 to grab a superb second on the grid. Pelfrey filled the second row with Will Ontan and Pateau Award. Junks' Will Owen rounded out the top 5, ahead of Kate Motorsports' Wayne Taylor Racing pair, Jake Edison and Nico Jamin. Junks' Nicholas Dapero and Jake Parsons followed, with JDC Motorsports' Jorge Savalos completing the grid. The 40-minute race saw drama from the off as Jamin got into the back of teammate Edison on the first lap, but they both kept going. Parsons dived into the pits at the end of the lap, while Teles held off O'Ward and Grist at the front. Jamin got past Savalos and Dapero before the turning point of the race as a full course caution came out on lap 15. Parsons went into the barriers in turn 13, but the Australian was fine. Edison pitted under the yellow before it went green on lap 21 with just over 5 minutes left. Teles kept the lead until the penultimate turn of the restart lap when O'Ward dived down the inside to take his second win of the season. Grist held off Tan to take a fine podium with Owen, Jamin, Dapero, Edison and Savalos completing the order. The second 40-minute race saw O'Ward on pole thanks to his fastest lap in race 1, ahead of Teles, Grist, Jamin, Owen, Parsons, Tan down in 7th, Edison, Dapero and Savalos. On the first lap we saw a much scarier incident involving contact. Heading towards turn 5, Tan went over the back of Parsons' car and slowly rolled in the air, but the Malaysian emerged unharmed from his flight. Once the safety car came in on lap 4, we saw Grist attack Teles like he did on the first lap on the outside in turn 5. The Pelfrey driver held on and despite setting the fastest lap, couldn't match his teammate O'Ward's consistency as the Mexican driver made it a weekend sweep and 3 wins out of 4 races so far. Grist got another 3rd place to complete a fine weekend ahead of teammate Owen, who made a good move on Jamin in turn 7 to get 4th ahead of the Frenchman. Edison was 6th with Dapero getting 7th after a good battle with Savalos in the early stages was settled with a move in turn 5 on lap 5. O'Ward leads the championship on 122 points from teammate Teles by 12 points, while Grist jumps to 3rd with 72 points, 38 behind Teles. It already looks like a 2-man title race if O'Ward can find the funding to complete the season. Jamin is 4th with 70 points, 1 ahead of Tan, 6 ahead of Edison and 7 ahead of Owen. Parsons is 8th on 53 points, with Savalos on 51 and Dapero on 50, rounding out the top 10, ahead of Barber, non-attendee Bobby Ibile. In the team championship, Pelfrey leads the way with a maximum 160 points, 66 ahead of Junkers and 74 ahead of Kate Motorsports with Wayne Taylor Racing. Leaving the best till last, this USF 2000 was just crazy, with another first time weekend sweeper taking the spools. There was so much action in the first race, I didn't have any time to make notes about it, so I apologise. All I've got is that there were plenty of good battles, especially for 3rd. We saw Parker Thompson with Kate Motorsports with Wayne Taylor Racing on pole ahead of teammate Martin. Paps Racing's Jordan Lloyd was 3rd with Arms Up Motorsports Victor Franzoni and J Motorsports Luke Gavin completing the top 5. John Comiskey Racing's Ida Guerin, Pelfrey's young'un Jordan Kane, Cape's other driver Nikita Lastotkin, Paps Garth Richards and Pelfrey teenager Robert McGuinness rounded out the top 10 on the grid. At the start, Franzoni jumped up to 2nd ahead of Australians Lloyd and Martin, with Kane up to 6th and another Pelfrey driver in James Monroe up to 9th from 11th. Meanwhile, Thompson kept the lead and led all the way to get his first USF 2000 win ahead of Franzoni. The Canadian was also the only driver to set a race lap in the 124s to make it a perfect victory. Martin won a hard battle for the final podium spot against fellow Australian Gavin, with Lloyd finishing ahead of fellow Jordan, Kane in 5th. Jastopkin, Aguerin, Richards and Chastain Motorsports, Austin McCluster completed the top 10. The second race saw Martin start from pole ahead of Thompson, Gavin, Aguerin, Lloyd, Franzoni, Kane, Richards, Jastopkin and McGuinness. At the start, Thompson jumped into the lead ahead of Gammon, Martin, Lloyd and Franzoni. Aguerin fell down to 6th, while McGuinness jumped up to 7th before teammate Monroe stopped with a broken drive shaft out of turn 6 on the second lap, bringing out a caution.
Once it went green on that, 4 Franzoni got past Martin for 4th in turn 5, then battled hard with Lloyd for a podium. This didn't end well on that 13, bringing out the full course caution. Franzoni tried to get alongside Lloyd in the fast turns 9 and 10, but this just resulted in contact dropping the Brazilian down to 13th, while Paps Racing's Lloyd crashed into the barrier, although he did get back to the pits on the next lap. The race went green on that 15 and saw Thompson hold off Gammon for the remaining 4 laps of the race as the Cape driver set another fastest lap on the way to sweeping the weekend. McGuinness got his 2nd podium of the season after getting past Martin on the penultimate lap. Stotkin rounded out the top 5 ahead of Aguirre, Richards, McCluster, Franzoni recovered to 9th, and Pelfrey's TJ Fisher completed the top 10 ahead of Paps Yufeng Lau. Kane was 7th on the final lap until he crashed in turn 13 and ended up down in 19th. Eric Filgaris was the only national class runner in Barber. Thompson now leads the championship with 91 points, 11 ahead of the consistent Gammon. Lloyd has dropped to 3rd with 78 points, 5 ahead of teammate Lau and 7 ahead of fellow Australian Martin. McGuinness sits 6th on 66 points, 5 ahead of Franzoni, who's 4 ahead of Stotkin. Aguirre with 47 points and Richards on 42 points rounds out the top 10. In the team championship, K Motorsports lead on 105 points, just 2 ahead of Paps Racing. Pelfrey are 3rd with 63 points, ahead of J Motorsports on 60 points, and Arms Up Motorsports with 38 points. The Mazda Road to Indy returns with IndyCar at the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, as here will be another packed 7-race event.
What a great Alabama weekend. Behind Indy, Barber is probably the circuit I most want to visit on the IndyCar calendar. A demon track with some interesting scenery and one of the best motorsport museums in the world. Is there any reason not to go there at least once? Anyway, all 4 championships move on to what could be the most important month of May in IndyCar history, as it begins with the 3rd Grand Prix of Indianapolis and culminates with the 100th Indianapolis 500, the greatest spectacle in racing, and man does it have to be, next month. Sadly, I won't be able to get a proper preview for the Grand Prix of Indianapolis out in time. All you really need to know is that there are a few more names on the grid, like JR Hildebrand at Air Counter Racing, Alex Tagliani with AJ Foyt Racing, and Matty Bradbury making his IndyCar debut with his Pytech Murray KB Racing Technology effort. Reigning Indy Lights champion Spencer Piggott returns for Ray Hall at Menangan Racing after his debut outing in St. Pete. Will Powell won the race last year, leading from pole virtually all the way, although Graham Rahal and his Ray Hall at Menangan team were the stars of the race, finishing 2nd ahead of Montoya. Stefano Coletti got the only top 10 finish of his glittering IndyCar career. Oh, so hey, Cashinevez punted Scott Dixon at the start for being too damn good. Or the Brazilian just made a bad move. This year it's hard to look past the inaugural win of this race in 2014, Simon Pagenaud, to repeat that feat. He's won 2 in a row, leads the championship by almost a race win from Dixon, and it's the best he ever has in IndyCar this season. There are also the other usual suspects to keep an eye on, like the rest of Team Penske, Dixon and Canaan from Chip Ganassi, and on the Honda front, Rahal only, because Andretti seems to have gone fishing once again. Maybe look for Hinch to continue his good form with another top 10 finish, but not the challenge for the win, as the top 10 was quite stagnant last year, apart from Rahal, and you can't expect too different a race this time around with cars that have more downforce. Like Barber, don't think it will be a cracker, then get surprised if it somehow ends up like it did this past weekend. In the Indy Lights races, half the field could win, although I'm hoping Stoneman gets his maiden one. It will be painted Pelfrey in Pro Mazda, and Paps Racing or K Motorsports with Rain Taylor Racing with a slight chance of Team Pelfrey and Victor Franzoni in USF 2000. I'll be back in around 3 weeks time, so enjoy your first half of May. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next month.